welcome to today's Good Doctors Diagnose for Monday, July 13th. I'm Dr. Erin, and today I want to spend a few minutes talking about working with members of Generation Z, which is the generation after millennials and before Generation Alpha, which I just learned is the next generation, pardon the Star Trek pun. But I've been reading this book for Abby Research, Generation Z, A Century in the Making, which I'm going to review for Abby Research because there's so much insight here into how this generation works, what impacts them, how they see the world, all those things. For those of you that don't know, Generation Z is generally thought, in this book, they argue anyone born from 1995 to 2010. There's always a little bit of wiggle room on either side with generations, depending on who's doing the research and what they've determined. But the argument they make for 1995, I think, is really cogent because that's the first year that the internet became widely accessible. So that sounds like a pretty good starting point to me. But, you know, at Abby Research, we spend a lot of time talking about intergenerational and cross-generational offices. So what it's like to work with baby boomers, millennials, Gen X, and now Gen Z as they're coming into the workforce. So I've got, just from the first few chapters of this book, 3 tips for what you need to know about working with Gen Z workers. And this can really apply to any generation, but I'm going to specifically talk about some issues within Generation Z. So the first thing you need to know is that the key cultural events of their adolescence. We know from generational researchers that key political events, cultural events, social events that happen in an adolescence of an age cohort, like a generation, tend to have the most impact on how they see the world and how they view their role in engaging with politics and the like. So for example, for millennials, one of the key events of our adolescence was 9/11. But for these kids, they were like, the oldest Gen Z was only 5 or 6 when 9/11 happened. So they don't have the same kind of, it doesn't have the same kind of impact for them. Whereas events like the Great Recession of 2008, Hurricane Katrina in 2005, the election of Barack Obama in 2008 will be some of the bigger kind of aspects of their adolescence, and even going up into events that are happening now, the Black Lives Matter movement, climate change activism. We're seeing Gen Z participate and engage in a lot of these issues. So you need to understand kind of what shaped them, because they're going to bring those values into the workplace, and you know, what kind of job they want to have, what kind of role they want to have within your organization. All of that is going to come from how they were formed and how they see the world. The second thing that you need to know about Gen Z workers is how they learn and how they work. So they might seem like different things or the same thing. But as this generation is kind of, we call them technological natives. So they were, which is not a great political term to use, but they were digital natives. They were born into, you know, all of this digital change that's been happening, all of this technological change. So it's important to know how they learn and how they work and how they use technology to do that. So for instance, I've learned in this book that Gen Z utilizes a lot of video content to find information. So does your company have recruiting videos up on YouTube? Do they have a presence on Tumblr and Reddit? These are ways you're going to engage members of this generation in the workforce differently than millennials, differently than Gen X. So how they learn and how they work is going to help you recruit new employees. It's going to help you retain them by understanding how their brain works, how they process information, what motivates them, what engages them intellectually. All of those things are going to help you secure really dedicated Gen Z workers. And the third thing is how they are given feedback. And this is very different for each generation, kind of what feedback looks like in education and in learning up to the point where you start to get a job. What we were seeing a lot with Gen Z is the impact of gamification, which means the readily accessible nature of games in a lot of those handheld devices. So a lot of Gen Z has been trained on getting badges, getting awards, getting notifications when they've achieved a new level. And so a lot of that plays into different ways that feedback is given in an educational environment. Certainly utilizing games in that way, but even just in the way achievements are recognized. So know how they expect to hear feedback, how they're used to being given feedback, and how they respond to it. They might also need a lot more individualized attention and individualized specific feedback rather than, you know, this group did a good job on the presentation. You might need to change some of your feedback strategies as well to make sure that you're communicating in the most effective way with your Gen Z workers. So those are 3 of the top tips that I've gotten already from this book, Generation Z, which I'm going to recommend now, even though I'm only 100 pages in. And I will certainly have a review for you guys when I'm finished with it. So look out for that in our Abby Research Reads series. That's everything I've got for you for this Monday. We'll be back again on Wednesday. Take care, everybody.